Okay, what's up, YouTube? This is the Cringe Crew Gaming James Bond movie podcast, where I, a fan of the James Bond series, and Ted here, a newbie, review the James Bond movies, and we get the perspectives on both sides of the coin. I'm Traductus.
And I'm Ted.
And the movie that we are reviewing, despite the title, is not a hentai. It is not a Japanese live-action tentacle porn movie, and it is not the name of the porn movie that the Octomom is in. This is the James Bond movie Octopussy. Not a porn. I repeat that.
Yeah,
not a porn.
Not.
Just a very demeaning title towards women. Anyway, made in 1983, this is based off of the short story Octopussy, and which was featured in the 1966 short story collection released after Ian Fleming's death. The short story collection being Octopussy and the Living Daylights. This movie, for the most part, is basically all original. Like, it's an original story. But there are bits and pieces from like various like Bond novels and short stories, like the backgammon scenes from the novel Moonraker. The short story of Octopussy is the character of Octopussy's backstory, and the auction scene comes from the short story The Property of a Lady, which has yet to become a title of a James Bond movie. Although
at this rate they can't, because they mentioned the title of it 7 fucking times in 4 minutes.
Yeah. Although The Property of a Lady, which we will get to, was almost a title for a James Bond movie. But a certain lawsuit thing happened, and that movie was never made. But could be made in the future. We'll see. But anyway, this is the first movie distributed by MGM since United Artists was acquired by MGM. Again, this was directed by John Glenn, who directs all the James Bond films in the 80s. This is his second film that he's directing. Screenplays by Richard Mayball, Michael G. Wilson, and a new comer to this, George MacDonald Fraser, who is best known for his works that feature the character Flashman, whatever that is. That's just yeah. Back is John Barry. Apparently, the reason why he didn't do the music for For Your Eyes Only was because he was having tax issues.
Love it.
But he's back in this one. He will return again with A View to a Kill, which is the next one, and then also finally with The Living Daylights. But I'm glad to have him back, despite me not liking the Bond theme, which is all-time high. No, they did not call the Bond theme Octopussy, which, kudos for them for that, as opposed to, keeping the film's title that. But,
yes.
Anyway, yeah, it's all-time high. It actually reached the adult contemporary charts. Not the first Bond film movie theme to actually hit, like, a Billboard chart of some kind. Like, a lot of them hit the UK charts. But the only reason I'm specifying charts right now is because it's going to be rather important in the next movie, like chart success. So I just kind of want to build up, foreshadow. Anyway, the budget of this movie was 200, not 200, god damn it, $27.5 million, and it made a box office return of $187.5 million. And during its time, it was critically acclaimed. Nowadays, reviews are all over the place, which I think we might get to with the overview, because like there's positive reviews and there's like reviews that are like, yeah, it's okay, and then there's ones that just say this is a pile of dog shit. Like, I've seen this movie ranked lower than Moonraker for whatever fucking reason. Which you can see makes us like, what?
That makes me feel violent.
But anyway, let's go into some more details. All right. Originally, this was going to be set in a different country, but due to one of the writers using a early script of his previous work being set in India, suggested India, so they moved everything to India. Also, Roger Moore originally was not going to be James Bond for this film. They actually had a few people have a couple of screen tests, including an actor by the name of Michael Billington, Oliver Tobias, but they eventually settled on actor James Brolin. For those who don't know who James Brolin is, modern audiences probably know him best as the father of Josh Brolin, who is the actor of Thanos in the Marvel series. James Brolin, people probably will know him in the original as the dad in the original Amityville Horror, and he's also the dad that gets kidnapped in the movie Master of Disguise.
Okay. I hadn't put that together.
Yeah. He was cast, and he was going to be the first American to play James Bond. However, due to Never Say Never Again being made with Sean Connery in there, producers were like, yeah, we're not having a new Bond go against Sean Connery. So they, called up Roger Moore, who was at this time, movie by movie contract. He wasn't under a movie deal. It was just like, hey, you want to do this movie? Yeah, sure. Okay, you're contracted for just this movie. And every time they kept asking him, he kept coming back, and he came back for this one. For the role of the main Bond lady, Octopussy, originally they were going to cast actress Sybil Danning, but however, they backed out on that due to her saying that her personality was too strong. Suggested as well was Faye Dunaway, but they figured that she was too expensive to get. Barbara Carrera, who played Fatima Blush in Never Say Never Again, was also asked to do the role. She turned that one down. I mean, the role of Octopussy down to be in Never Say Never Again. And eventually they ended up, since they used her in a bunch of screen tests, they ended up casting Maud Adams, who plays Scaramaga's girlfriend in The Man with the Golden Gun, as Octopussy in this film, and obviously given a lot better role, despite the demeaning name. Also cast as her hench lady. What I mean by hench lady, like, Octopussy isn't technically a villain in this. Like, she's on the villainous side unknowingly, so she kind of has, like, her own, like, set of goons, but, like, the main hench lady, Magda, is played by, Christina Wayborn, who is also a Swedish actress, such as Maud Adams. Also cast in this, we have a new person as M, because, Bernard Lee died before For Your Eyes Only, so they had to recast M, and he's cast with the actor Robert Brown, and he ended up getting the job because he was recommended by Roger Moore himself, since they both acted in a previous film, and they actually had, really decent chemistry with each other. For another one of Bond's allies, VJ, is played by professional tennis player VJ Amritraz. Amritraj. Amritraj.
Oh,
All
we
right.
just talked about this. Back up from your mic.
Sorry. I'm trying to read the.
You're booming, bud.
Yeah, but anyway, VJ gets the job as VJ due to Cubby Broccoli. Ended up meeting him at the championships at Wimbledon, and it was actually the first person cast in the entire cast of this movie.
Here's like a weird first roll to land, but hey, I mean, take it.
Yeah. As for the villains, we have French actor Louis Jourdan as Kamal Khan, who is an interesting choice. He was a friend of Cubby Broccoli's, which is how he ended up getting the job. Louis Jourdan is probably best known, at least to me, as the person that plays Dr. Anton Crane, who is the main villain in the 1980s Swamp Thing movies. But apparently is actually a very, very acclaimed actor, and even has like a star in like the Hollywood, Walk of Fame. So there's that. The reason why I think it's a strange choice is because he's supposed to be playing a exiled Afghan prince, and here's the thing. I'll say this: like Central Asia is a lot more ethnically diverse than people think it is. So there very well could be someone that's more European descent be Afghan royalty. There is a possibility, although unlikely. That being said, this isn't like Dr. No, where it's like subtle, like yellow face. Like that, Laurie Jourdan is not in brown face or anything like that. It's just a white dude with a name of Kamal Khan.
Right.
And
it was a weird French accent overlapping the ethnicity he was supposed to portray, which it definitely made him stand out as an ethnic character.
Yeah, and he didn't necessarily have that much of an accent, except he basically kind of plays himself.
Yeah.
That's the funny thing, because like to me, I'm just like, this is Anton Crane from Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
Which isn't a bad thing, oddly enough. Like, but with like, with a weirdly like whitewashed role, it's awkward, but when you don't think about it, it fits.
I was gonna say the strangeness of it was the fact that like his ethnicity was important ish, not the way that he portrayed the character. I mean I thought he acted it well. Like, I mean, he filled the role well. It just was weird that like part of the plot line developed around him being Afghan royalty, and he was a very clearly French guy. Like, that was the. It wasn't bad. It wasn't egregiously disgusting, but it definitely sat in a weird spot.
And then we have Stephen Burkhoff, who is probably best known as the as Victor Maitland, who is the villain in the first Beverly Hills Cop movie, as General Orlov, and he gets the role after being suggested by Cubby Broccoli's daughter, Barbara Broccoli, who would take over the series after Cubby Broccoli's death. Well, actually, shortly before. She takes over like during GoldenEye. But other people that are in the cast, I also kind of want to add this right here. Kabir Bedi as Gobinda, who is Kamal Khan's head bodyguard, and can more or less technically be like the third villain in this. since like all three villains are kind of like kind of seem like all on like an even playing field, having an equal part in uh this scheme that they have cooked up. But uh he's actually played by Kabir Bedi, who is an actual Indian guy. So, oddly enough, I actually thought this was just a white dude in brown face. Like, they just put a white dude, tanned his skin a little bit, and put him in a turban. But no, he's actually an Indian, and I'd say I'm glad that we kind of sort of finally got to uh, a part where in these movies where they're actually played by, someone of a suitable ethnicity, even though Kamal Khan isn't. At least we got somebody.
We've moved on from blatant racism to mild ignorance. Somehow an upgrade, but yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah. That being said, that's basically what I have for casting. I do have like another thing to suggest in within that has to do with casting. There is a younger lady that is cast as a assistant to Miss Moneypenny, and the reason why was they were actually going to retire the character of Moneypenny since Lois Maxwell was getting up there in age.
Mm-hmm.
But they ended up not doing that. Like she comes back, Lois Maxwell comes back as Moneypenny uh after this movie, and in the Timothy Dalton era, which is 2 movies after this one, um Moneypenny is still brought back, but with cast as like a younger a younger actress, so that way to go with the younger Bond, since Lois Maxwell is probably like in her 60s, late 50s at that point.
Sure.
That makes sense. Not at this point. This point she's she's around similar to like Connery's and Roger Moore's age, so she's in her 50s like Roger Moore is, and Moore, I believe, is 56 in this, which kind of becomes a little bit of a factor in this movie, but luckily with Maud Adams being 38 and Christina Wayborn being in her 30s as well, the age gap isn't as egregious as it was in For Your Eyes Only.
Absolutely.
So that literally helps, and that's basically what I have for casting. And
before we get into likes and dislikes, I also want to talk about cinematography a little bit.
Right.
So, I thought that, all right, there wasn't a long period of time between these two Roger Moore films, but the action and effects for this one actually felt pretty close to modern. There was I had a mild issue with sound, especially towards it was worse at the beginning of the movie than it was at the end. The sound was kind of hollow, like they were speaking into a tin can, kind of like echoey, and there wasn't a whole lot of protection against it. It got better towards the end of the movie, and I'm wondering if that partially is sets of or location where the movie was at for those specific scenes. But there were some mild sound qualities, but for the most part, like, I thought everything was filmed really well. They did really good jobs with camera work, the action, the effects, the way that the movie was filmed was really good. Obviously it has its 80s shtick, where every movie from the 80s is from the 80s because of the way it was filmed, which it's hard for me to include this in likes and dislikes just because it is an observation about the movie, but as an overall positive, I've mentioned it in almost every movie we watched so far. So but the cinematography of it, the filming of the actual movie was, I thought, pretty well done, and it felt miles ahead of the movies previous, which were only 2 years separated at closest. So
Yeah, I agree. I think the cinematography is the best it's ever been since like maybe Thunderball.
it,
Like
And even in the ones that it's been good previously, this one feels more complete. You know, even with
Yeah.
movies like Thunderball, that it was done really, really well. There were still some, deficits to it. This one, while it may not have been as on a high bar as Thunderball was for the time, like there were much less low notes too. Like everything hit the same stride. Everything was very consistently good.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and to me, that's kind of a positive when we go into likes and
Sure.
well, might as well go right into likes
Yeah.
and dislikes. I'll add on to there, like, that's one of my likes. Definitely is cinematography and also establishing shots. They're all really beautiful, and they really um set the location of where you're at. Like, you actually look like you're in India and or feel like you're in India, and when you're like over in like Eastern Germany, like they actually show like different things from like Eastern Germany that you're actually right into Eastern Germany, and then other locations that
Yeah.
they ended up shooting everything at.
Yeah, and
Like,
even despite the movie's plotline taking you to several different locations, like even within India itself, right? Like there were some very, highbrow places that were clearly of wealth. There were clearly some, neighborhoods isn't the right word, but uh some poorer villages kind of thing that but they did a very good job at making you recognize the transition from one to the next and feeling like the movie for that point in the plot belonged there.
yeah, absolutely. Um, but to go into more detail and probably like list things out, you want me to go first? You want
Yeah.
to go first?
Yeah, no, you have at it.
All right. I'll say this: this movie is better than remembered it being. I remember I was one of those people that was like in like the okay range. It's like I could get why people, to me, like at first I'm like, I get why people don't really care for this movie. Uh and I was like, but it's not really that bad or anything like that. Like, it's a lot better. It has a silly name, but it's a lot better. Watching it now, I'm just like, this is actually way better than it has any fucking business of being with that title.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, and when we go into like the Battle of the Bonds episode, I wonder if a lot of this being as good as it is had to do with the fact it had competition. But see, I really like a lot of the characters in this. I think the characters are decently fleshed out. With the
Mhm.
I like the idea of General Orlov, but when we get to dislikes, we'll talk about the execution of him. Uh, but I like the fact that uh, you have sort of, in a way, you have like the British and Russians kind of working together, doing like with separate motives. Like General Gogol is like obviously has his agenda of like wanting to like cool down the Cold War tensions and dealing with a crazy fucking general that wants to start World War III because he thinks that the Soviet Union has the ability to win the entire thing, and also is investigating him stealing all the um, jewelry from all of the Kremlin's museums and smuggling it to the West. And then on the other side of the die, you have like um Jade's Bond trying to investigate why are we having all like these like really really good fakes of Soviet jewelry that all of a sudden is kind of becoming like uh sold as like the real thing in auctions, but what's end up getting switched out ends up being a fake. So is it the KGB raising money or not? And it ends up not being that. It's actually a really cool plan. Essentially Orlov is like using uh jewelry smuggling to pay Kamal Khan and tricking jewelry smuggler Octopussy into smuggling a nuclear bomb into a NATO Air Force base and setting it off, making NATO think that they accidentally launched a missile there and calling for nuclear disarmament of NATO, and then convincing the USSR to do a strike first while they have an advantage.
Yeah, the plot in the I mean, you sort of highlighted the major points of the plot there. That was a huge plus for me, right? Through
And
almost all of the Bond films, right? Like the plot has been bad guy plans to do bad thing, Bond says no and stops him, and that's the end of that, right? Like, but this plot was
you had
clearly,
to figure it out.
yeah. I mean, there was a lot of development of the plot where it wasn't so cut to form, and like it was so well thought out. Like the plot developed on itself. There were multiple villains and plot lines and motives that all converged into the same place that made this plot line more complex. You had to think about it, you had to be paying attention to the movie. Like the I appreciated that it wasn't just the same form, bad guy plans bad thing, Bond says no. The plot of this movie, the way that the villains had motives, was so well developed that genuinely, the plot line was better in this one than in all others combined. The plot was so strong.
Yeah, I think the only one that kind of really rivals this, as in like villain plan plot, is either from I'd say probably From Russia with Love, because that one's a little, more in depth, but it's more so like you already know the plot and you have to see if Bond's gonna kind of figure it out. While in this one, we know as much as Bond, and you have to actually figure out what all is going on as you kind of go. Because even though you know that Orlov and Kamal Khan are working with each other, you're not really sure why they're working with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I even asked during the movie about the plot line. Like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and you watched Bond come up with the reasoning behind it. A handful of minutes
That,
later,
yeah, that
like
was funny because like it was actually like it was literally like about like
it was
10,
2 minutes
5
apart.
or 10 minutes
Yeah,
before you're just like, is this gonna make sense? And it's
right.
like, I'm like, no. They tell you why they're working with each other,
I
like
was
unless you want me to spell it out for you.
No, I
He's
was
like, oh
genuinely
no,
afraid I missed something. I really was like, all right, I must have missed a sentence somewhere. Like, what is happening now, right? But
well, and I will say this much: pay attention with the Living Daylights, because we're gonna compare this to the Living Daylights when we get to the Living Daylights, which is 2 movies away.
yeah,
Because that one has a similar thing where it reveals the plot why these two are working together, and there's multiple villains. Although I'm not sure which one's gonna do that better,
okay,
so I'm excited for that. I do know for a fact that the Living Daylights, it's a little bit more complex than Octopussy is. I do know that. So
yeah,
it might be a little bit, if you blink you miss a couple things, but
sure,
um that
yeah,
being said, like I really like the slow burn of the plot. I also like this movie doesn't bog down like at all,
hmm
really. Like even though like the last film there was like a lot of action scenes like thrown in there, and it was almost like the exposition was to get to an action scene in the last one, while this one it's like the action scenes lead to like exposition, if that makes sense.
yeah. I agree. I mean, we kind of brought this up as we were watching, but um, in previous movies, there have been action that felt unnecessary. There have been scenes that felt unnecessary. And while this movie had a high rate of action, it felt like very little was unnecessary. I don't think there was anything out of place or extraneous, to be completely honest with you. Like, I thought that everything that was in the movie felt like it was there with purpose. Um I don't think they overindulged themselves. There were no, you know, 40-minute underwater end of movie scenes to just wrap things up and make this a 2.5 hour movie. Like, I mean, like, even the action that was included, while it felt abundant, if you were just to boil it down to how much action versus how much exposition, like, there was a really good amount of the action in this has purpose. There's a reason for it happening, and everything felt really well motived.
Yeah, and there's a lot of it too. Like even like at the to compare this with like OHMSS, like you'd had like the storm of Pisgloria, which led to like the bobsled chase, and that kind of felt like a little unnecessary. While in
Mhm.
this film, you have the storming of Kamal Khan's palace, and then he's escaping on an airplane, and then you have the whole airplane thing at the end. That, as ridiculous as that was, like it didn't seem like it caused anything to drag. It was just like a continuation of like uh
Getting their
of
budget's worth.
yeah, like
Yeah.
it's a continuation getting their budget's worth, and a continuation of like Bond facing off with Gobinda and Kamal Khan.
Yeah.
It also helps that they, kidnapped Octopussy as a hostage, so therefore, he has to rescue the woman.
Right.
Although she is very capable on her own, it's just that they managed to knock her out,
Yeah.
which I think is a huge plus. Like Octopussy and all of her like women that she has working for him are very, very capable um of taking care of themselves, and they
Mhm.
don't necessarily give like Octopussy, despite being captured, doesn't give a uh damsel in distress vibe like a lot of
Never.
female characters have happened. She's more akin to like Tracy, where when she gets captured, it's more of like coincidence as opposed to like, oh yeah, and then we're just going to ruin it.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, they could have told this plot in an hour and a half. You know what I mean? And what was it? Runtime was probably 210, 215.
Somewhere around. Wait, actually, haha.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wikipedia. 131 minutes.
Yeah. So 211. I, I,
Okay.
I like, again, there were places that you could have cut back if you absolutely have to, right? I mean, the female lead getting captured and the whole fight scene with the plane, you probably could have avoided that if you absolutely had to. But it all felt like it had a natural fit into the movie. It didn't feel like there was anything extraneous. There was nothing that you were watching in the moment going, okay, they could cut this and the movie would be the same. Like, everything felt like it had a reason to be there, and it was well developed. Nothing dragged, nothing cut on, nothing like, there wasn't a whole lot that you would be willing to cut from this movie the way it was actually directed and produced.
Right, right. Um, which I have to say, like, the cool thing about this is that it's almost like John Glenn took like a page out of Terrence's Young book and actually like improved upon the previous movie that he directed. Of course, I mean you could argue Lewis Gilbert did the same, but like Lewis Gilbert also like made the same film like 3 fucking times.
Yeah.
While this one's obviously different from For Your Eyes Only.
Sure.
Um so um I'm definitely kind of interested in seeing like if John Glenn, like how John Glenn really like, if it ends up being solely the way, getting better and better, or if he's gonna hockey puck like Guy Hamilton and Terrence Young. Although the hockey puck with Terrence Young isn't that bad. Like it's abrupt from Dr. No to From Russia with Love, and it dips a little bit with uh Thunderball. Hopefully um A View to a Kill's not gonna like hockey puck as extreme as like Goldfinger to Diamonds Are Forever.
I have to hope so. But
Yeah, I don't think it is. Although I will say, like, A View to a Kill, I will warn you, is campy as hell. But like, what do you expect when you have Christopher Walken as the villain in the 80s?
yeah. Fair enough.
I mean, it's before. Well, it's. I mean, it's way before where he gets very Christopher Walkenly, where he's like, "I need more cowbell." But it's definitely there, if that helps.
Sure.
But back to this movie. um, there is another positive that I like that has to go with some of the campiness on this, but I don't really want to. I'm not sure if like you have it on your likes. If you want to go next
Yeah,
about like sort of like the comedy, I don't want to step on your
yeah.
toes a
No,
whole lot.
I could take over. Yeah. I I mean, you mentioned that one, so I'll start with that one. I thought the comic relief in this movie was brilliant. Um, Thunderball is a good threshold to compare it to, where I thought that it wasn't necessarily comic relief as much as campiness, but the campiness was amusing and entertaining, and you got to laugh and have a fun time with it. This one was one-liners isn't quite right, but like a line or two of dialogue that gave you some humor, and then they moved on and back to the things that were important. The one that stuck out particularly was they were traveling in the buggy through the poorer streets of India, and the guy who was the first one
VJ.
cast, VJ, acted by a tennis player, is beating up a bad guy with a tennis racket, right? Like, and there's a crowd on the streets, and it's so subtle. Like both times they filmed it could have lasted half a second, absolute maximum combined. But the crowd looks left, the crowd looks right, as if they're viewing a tennis match. It was so unnecessary and so worthless, but it was just half a second of comic relief. It was brilliant to have thrown it in there.
Which is
To cut it out makes something serious out of something so absolutely intentionally ridiculous. To like accentuate that, like to make it longer, to really drag that out, makes it campy and stupid. It was the perfect amount of comic relief, and they did it so many times through this movie. I genuinely, the comedy added in between the bits of action or dialogue, it was absolutely phenomenal.
I mean, especially like even also like the action scene where Kamal Khan is like basically doing a tiger hunt on Bond, and uh the fact that he's like he sees a tiger and he just tells the tiger to sit. Like, as stupid as it is, it works in that context because you're kind of thinking like, well, what else are you gonna do when a tiger is in front of you? I mean, there's not much you can really do, and just like hope that it leaves you alone.
Yeah, and to add in the relief, they didn't make the, hey, he saw a tiger in the jungle and now he's got to run from the tiger, and it's a 10-minute drawn out stint of him trying to be faster than this jungle cat, right? Like, it was a second and a half. It was a line of dialogue. It was one thing that you kind of chuckled at, but then you got right back to what was important about the movie. I mean, the way that they threw such small, subtle bits of comedy into all of the pieces of this movie was
Oh yeah,
so brilliantly done.
it's especially at the end of that scene where he like escapes. And they're like, he goes into like this boat full of tourists. And they're like, "Are you with our? Are you with us?" It's like, "No, I'm in the economy tour." But there's that. I also like the fact that going back to like the car chase, I like how like these car chases, like going back to For Your Eyes Only, with like they're not like these sports cars. They're like these shitty economy like vehicles. And
Hmm.
it's in a lot more exciting car chase than it is with like the sports cars. And it's
Yeah.
very amusing on that.
Yeah, well, and a lot of that goes back to cinematography too. Is that like even with slow moving vehicles in a taxi cab through crowded streets of I don't want to say rural India, but villages more so than
Yeah.
metropolis is. Just it was filmed well. The camera work was good. The ways that they positioned in the action, the way that the action was choreographed, like the filming of it was good enough to make these slow paced chase scenes so much better than, well, the car goes fast so it must be good. Like I mean, truly
It's
terrific.
it's kind of better than some of like the car chases in like modern films. Like I'd rather watch like the car chase in this movie than like a car chase of any of like the Fast and the Furious films past Tokyo Drift.
Ugh.
Like,
using Tokyo Drift threshold makes me a little upset, but it's hard to disagree. Yeah, I mean,
I'm not saying that this. Actually, I'd probably rather watch this than Tokyo Drift. I'm just saying that a lot of those Fast and the Furious movies are pretty terrible after Tokyo Drift.
yeah. Alongside the comedic relief and the tropes that weren't necessarily Bond tropes, one of my other likes was that it was really cool to see movies that were not, I guess, not in the same vein as other rips in previous James Bond movies.
Right.
The one that I'm thinking of particularly is they ripped on Tarzan because he legitimately swung on a rope and gave a guttural growl. Right, again,
that was
half a second. The comedic relief was funny. They moved past it, but like they created tropes that weren't just taking the same action scenes from the same movies. It didn't look like an Indiana Jones trope. It didn't look like but taking all of these things and turning it into movies that have very clearly taken from this Bond movie rather than Bond taking from the same tropes that is used in every movie. It wasn't ripping
right.
from Citizen Kane where it's turned into every movie ever. It was taking things that were very clearly niche and applying them in a context that you wouldn't necessarily expect them to. I thought it was really cool to see rips from something different.
Yeah, I agree. I agree as with that completely. Is there anything more that you want to add to like the likes? Because I mean, I have a couple more.
Yeah, not really. I mean, most of my big ones, the ones that I wanted to mention, overlapped with yours a lot.
All right.
The comic relief, the thoroughness of the plot line, and not adding a whole bunch of abundant filler. I mean, those were my big ones. Lots of
Yeah.
overlap with yours.
I also like that Bond has to earn his escape again, and he only really like gets captured once. And I like the fact that the villain, despite not knowing quite who Bond is smart enough. Because Kamal Khan is smart enough to be like, yeah, we should just kill him. But like Octopussy doesn't want to because she feels indebted to him because he let her father have an honorable death as opposed to being court-martialed and embarrassed. So therefore, it's not Kamal's Khan's fault that Bond escapes.
Right. It wasn't
More or
setting him up
less.
for success. It was even more thoroughly developed of, yeah, Bond is captured and he finds a way to get out. Like at least there was a reason for it this time.
Yeah,
I
like
agree.
Kamal Khan throughout this entire thing is like, yeah, we should kill him. We should totally kill him. He's gonna escape. We should just flat out kill him. And then, no one listens to him. Which is honestly the best thing about this, because like this is to criticize like a lot of people about this film typically like consider Kamal Khan like a boring villain. I don't think he is. I think he's at least yes, he's subtle, but like I think he really like Louis Jourdan's performance really helps this come through because he's such a sleazeball.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. And honestly, like, I can understand the arguments of him being a weak villain, but
especially compared to like Gobinda, who has that um I guess menacing, look, and with Orlov being like way over the fucking top, and then just having Kamal Khan there, he's just like a typical like egotistical villain, but like
yeah.
done it normally.
Well, and I guess a lot of the weakness too comes not from the fact that it was weak, but more the fact that like the villainship was shared between multiple people.
Right.
Not, I mean, I thought Khan was fine. Like I to look at him by itself, like maybe he didn't have as fully developed a time as a villain as previous movies, but like the plot was so good and it fit with so many other villains at the same time that like it didn't get its own movie kind of
Yeah.
villainship. It was divided between several different places. So honestly, I didn't think it was that bad, and I can forgive it.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that bad either. Honestly, I think he's actually kind of underrated as a Bond villain. Like it was, fun to see him basically like increasingly getting more agitated at Bond, and Bond just basically having more and more and more enjoyment and just antagonizing him, like kind of like with like Diamonds Are Forever, where it's just like he's kind of like doing like the whole like I'm not touching you, I'm
Yeah.
not touching you type of thing to the villain. Which is about the only positives of Diamonds Are Forever. I'm just glad that this is done in a good movie. um, but I guess we'll go in the negatives because there are negatives to this, although for me they're kind of very few.
Yeah, I was gonna say my list is relatively short too. Um, I thought
Please tell me. Wait, no. Before you do that, please mention the thing if
which
you wrote it down.
which thing? Oh no, I didn't. No, I genuinely didn't write that one down.
Oh,
The one
come
the,
on!
the one he wants me to mention is we got to it was pretty close to the end of the movie, and there's the parade running through the NATO base, and the parade float doesn't stop at a stop sign. I made the mistake of saying it out loud, and then I doubled down on it while we were watching because they laughed at me that like that was a thing that I decided to say. I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm scratching out all of my notes and I'm writing down they didn't stop at the stop sign. I can't do this movie, right? Okay. Now that we've covered that,
Damn it!
I I thought that this movie took some liberties that hadn't necessarily been justified through previous Bond movies. So I'm going to use an example before I explain it more thoroughly. Again, towards the end of the movie, as the plot line is wrapping up, like once Bond has recognized the plot, but before he gets to the NATO base, was he turns into a marksman. There's 3 different people who all have much bigger, better weapons than he does, with a sight line. He hides behind next to no cover, but he pops out for half a second and he pops them all same place, right between the eyes. One shot, one bullet, straight between the eyes, right? If he was that kind of marksman, it would have played a role in previous plots.
I
You've,
mean, it
you've
does
watched,
in Moonraker once.
fuck Moonraker.
Once.
I mean, like you've watched him shoot in movies. It's not that you expect Bond to be inept with a firearm, right? Like, and that's not even what I'm saying. But man, that's a really clean shot. To do it once when you're underpowered is pretty incredible. To do it 3 times with only three bullets is something I can't necessarily suspend disbelief for. Right? If he was that
Right.
kind of marksman, he wouldn't be renowned as a spy. He wouldn't have the global reputation for espionage. He would have the global reputation for being Chris Kyle, and they'd remake American Sniper after James Bond, right? Like I. I think there's several other
God, now I'm picturing American Sniper with Roger Moore. I don't know if he was alive when that movie was made. But
either way, I'm my point is that like I'm not to say that I expect Bond to be something inept, right? I recognize him to be not necessarily superhuman, but to have above human qualities as the protagonist in all of these movies, right? I recognize that he needs to be better at his job than the villains are at theirs in order for all of these plot lines, all of these movies to ever be created. And I I think that there are places in which they just go, well, the plot doesn't develop if we don't make him some sort of extra human. And I feel like there were probably ways to write around most of them that they didn't need to take those kinds of liberties. Not to compare it to a different franchise, super thoroughly, but I don't know how many Star Wars fans are here, but if you watched the last trilogy, the most three recent movies that have come out. There was a scene with the I can't remember her name.
Is it Ray?
Yes, Rey and
Yay!
Kylo Ren, where they're talking to each other through some void using the Force, right?
Right.
And while it helped develop the plot of that movie, the same way that some of Bond's extra human abilities happened in this movie, like it was something that hadn't been established despite having a fully established franchise with several movies previous. And it was just a write it better, please. Just like there are better ways to go about it. Bond is a smart, crafty character. You don't necessarily need to make him the world's greatest shooter with his PPK. There were better ways to make certain things happen. The shooting wasn't the only example either.
Also, I'm not sure if I mean, I know that he does count his bullets, but I'm not sure if that magazine had as many bullets in there as he should have.
There were enough cuts that it didn't bother me, even if there were too many shots fired that like you could have missed a reload kind of thing. Like usually that's a thing I pay attention to, but there were enough cuts that like there was opportunity for reload, even if it wasn't necessarily the focal point. So I won't harp on that. But there were a lot of things that like it was hard. I've mentioned this, especially with the really early movies, the Connery movies, that it was hard to suspend disbelief. And while my skepticism of suspension of disbelief was smaller in this movie, it was still noticeable enough that I can't let it go entirely. A much smaller gripe was that Roger Moore looked like a geriatric patient. We were 8 seconds into the movie, and I was expecting.
Wait till you see view to a kill.
You know how you watch those old like moon landing videos, and the conspiracy theorists online are like, you can see a styrofoam cup. I was doing the same thing with this movie, but for a walker or a cane that got left in the camera shot. He genuinely looked like he was 90 years older than the movie that came out 2 years before this, where I also said he looked old. He genuinely looked like he needed multiple hip replacements just because of age and out of a safety precaution, not because he was immobile, but because he looked so unrealistically old.
Before someone calls us for being ageist, Roger Moore frequently made fun of his own old age during his last few Bond films, especially in the next one.
And
so that
and by all means, like, I mean, he was mobile, he was still active, he still filled the role, right? Like,
right.
There's no detriment whatsoever to his ability to, perform the actions that James Bond would. So no detriment to his acting, just visually he looked monumentally older than in the movie that came out 2 years before this. It was incredible to see the 15-year age gap that happened to him over 2 years. It just by the end of the movie, genuinely, I forgot that I wrote down that he was a geriatric patient, but it was. If you're looking for it, it is very, very hard to miss.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me, like, this one review that I read of this, it's like, even though it is distracting on how old Roger Moore is, so distracting that you find yourself during a few scenes where you're counting his wrinkles. It's like, the movie's still good. It's like, that just made me laugh because, like, it just reminded me with you just going, it's like, like Ted literally goes, what was the time period between this and the other one? I'm like, 2 years. He goes, you're fucking with me, right? I'm like, no, 2 years. Why? I'm like, he looks like he's aged about 10.
I was looking for a walker. I genuinely was looking for a walker. I guess I was just looking at the note and now I can't find it. I had one more. Right. Oh. I guess this gripe isn't necessarily with this movie, but with the franchise as a whole. But it I don't know how to phrase what I'm trying to say. Like it's there, and I can't formulate the words. Basically, like I think that they do this movie does a pretty decent job at keeping you in tune with what is politically happening. And I mean, I mentioned the Cold War involvement with the British because I know that the Cold War was primarily Americans and Russians, at least the way that my education provided it to me, right?
Yes. Yeah, with us it seems more like that. Because unfortunately, like a lot of our stuff is very Americentric when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
learning things. So when it comes to NATO, it's the U.S. and its allies, as opposed to like uh, as in everybody's an equal footing. It's like U.S. #1
Right.
is how it's portrayed to us. So we're not sure if it was like a little softer tensions between the UK and the
Yeah,
USSR as opposed with us and the USSR.
I know that Europe had its involvements through the Cold War. I mean, even through not embargoes necessarily, but similar kind of ideas. Like I recognize that Europe had its place, but um, it felt cool that this movie was able to interject itself into a conflict that I don't necessarily recognize as being a UK conflict. But then the reason this appears on my negatives list is because it I guess that it was just an ignorance from most of the previous movies to not include themselves in similar conflicts. They avoided certain filming locations or certain topics, certain countries as origins for villains because they didn't want to get themselves involved. And even when this movie took place in that, where they recognized the Russians' place in the Cold War, it was not necessarily Cold War focused, but more tensions that could be real with Russia because of the Cold War.
Cold War,
It
yes.
still felt delicate.
I mean, to me, I could kind of see what you're going with on this, Owen. To me, I kind of think that they, with this film specifically, I think they towed the line uh better than what they do with previous and also ones after this. They get a little bit too close to comfort and Die Another Day. So much so that it actually really, really, really pissed off North Korea. So like it was kind of like you know how like the interview pissed off North Korea?
Yeah. Well,
It was
that one
kind
was
of like
to piss off North Korea. That was on
that was kind of
purpose.
yeah. Well, this was done on accident for Die Another Day. So much
Fair.
so that it actually like set a lot of uh diplomacy back. So, um that being said, I can kind of see why that they would kind of tread, because it seems if you go too far one way, you kind of risk a fragile structure of how the world is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I can see how it's a valid criticism.
Yeah, and like I said, it's more of a gripe at the series more
Yeah,
than this one, but I guess the place that this one sat highlighted that.
yeah. It honestly kind of it highlighted how like they had those tensions before, but like the other movies, it's not the tension isn't really at the forefront. It's like a second thought, while the tension is at the forefront, where it's like, wow, like
It's apparent and they sidestep it rather
yeah,
than it just being a background emphasis.
right.
Yeah.
I guess we'll go for some of my dislikes. One is a specific scene, and that's when Bond and Octopussy like get together. Like he kind of forces herself on him, but she yells out no, and he stops. Which, holy shit!
Yeah,
A bond that knows the word no.
yeah, man. Okay, listen. There were several lines in this movie that were like, "All right, you guys don't give a fuck about sexism." The title of the movie, the way that they consistently address the female lead and emphasize that it's Octopussy instead of like, "Hey, you have a normal name, and then also this was your nickname," right? Like it just. There were several individual lines that are like sexist, right? It was so overtly, but in the grand scheme of things, there were feminist feels too empowering for what this movie did. I,
A
but
little progressive. Kind
right,
of like kind of like with like On Her Majesty's Secret Service,
yeah,
not a feminist movie by any means, but there's at least an attempt to like
yeah. I mean, the action scene in the compound, right? Like before Q brings Bond in the balloon, right? I mean, like there are women doing roles that are integral to the plot line, right? Like there
right.
is some empowerment and recognition that women are capable, which I thought was really great, especially for the 80s that didn't always recognize that thoroughly. But the like the sexism was overt, it was there, but it was in much smaller bits and pieces, and then they tried to counteract it with plot line. So not credit, not completely this is unforgivably sexist, right? But like it's some weird place in the middle where it's both like empowering and cruel.
Yeah, and then to finish what I was saying, and then she like initiates the kiss after she says, no, and he stops. To me, it's still kind of weird. It's not. It's kind of weird, and it's sort of like to me, it's like this is kind of something that would happen in the Connery thing. So I was more disappointed. I'm like, no, Roger Moore's Bond's better than this.
Yeah.
Like this wouldn't have happened. It would be like, she initiates it, and he's like, all right, I'll, go with it. Not like, granted, like we have that scene in Moonraker. Go back to that.
Fucking exist.
That, he basically kind of forces himself on a girl, and she just so happens to be into it. But that seems kind of very rare in like Roger Moore's Bond. So it's kind of disappointing that you see something that you'd expect from like a Connery film to be in a Roger Moore film, especially in 1983.
That's fair.
So like to me, it's not as bad as like the Pussy Galore thing and Goldfinger, or like the scene with like the masseuse and Thunderball, but it still doesn't make it any less like awkward.
Yeah.
It's not like sickeningly uncomfortable, but it's still pretty awkward.
Yeah. I'll give you that.
The other one is, I would say, there are a few cliches in this movie that, and this is a little bit nitpicky, but like some of the cliches, it's just like, are they really doing this? While we were watching this, Ted's cliche that he thought was kind of ridiculous was the scene where they're fighting on top of a train.
Oh
Ted
man. I called it out before it happened. I was like, if they're about to fight on top of this motherfucking train, I'm
And I'm like,
goddamn
they're gonna
leaving.
fight on top of the train. He goes,
It's
what? Really? Why? Why do movies consistently want to do this? And I'm like, well, what if this would start? I'm like, no, wait, never mind. Nope, nope, nope. This one didn't start the train on
you know,
top of the train.
right. And I gave it credit earlier, right? I mentioned the Tarzan one of swinging off the ropes and the tropes from things that you wouldn't expect. I recognize that that's been an old Western trope since probably the 30s, right? But like, man, it doesn't need to be so fucking
Yeah.
scripted.
If anything, it might be more than that. Like, I'm not sure if there was like a train fight, fight on the top of the train during like the Great Train Robbery in like 1910 or whenever the hell that was made. you know,
Just
but like it's been done in so many movies.
right, and it's nice to take from other places, but and you don't have to be so
Yeah.
fucking.
And And for my cliche, and I actually didn't hate it as much as I used to, but Kamal Khan's death, the airplane crashes into a mountain.
Yeah. That okay. So Stallman mentioned as we were watching that he's like, "You're gonna really hate this death," and the way that they did it didn't necessarily bother me, but it was. I get why Stallman's upset about it. Like it was. Oh, we're gonna plane. The plane's crashing. You can't see it. Hit a mountain. Explosion sound and visuals. Oh man!
Yeah,
Wow! What a
it's not
surprise!
that bad. Like Bond actually sabotages the airplane, and Kamal Khan actually tries to like fly the plane, but unfortunately, the plane's too fucked up to do anything.
Yeah,
But like,
but it was still
uh,
cliche enough to know it was coming.
yeah, and it's been done so many times before. More egregious though
Sure.
than that. I will say also, like, the fight on the airplane is a little ridiculous because, I mean, a lot easier to suspend my belief on the, uh, shall we say, air pressure cabin, and also the fact that the one, engine's, gets fucked
Right.
up and the plane's still going. I'm not sure if a plane would still fly in the air, but probably not as well as it was
Yeah.
during
We're
that fight scene. And I also thought, like, uh, they kind of led everything up to like this they're gonna fight on top of a plane, it's gonna be like this exciting thing, and Bond just like hits the hex, I want to make sure I can actually pronounce this, Gobinda, with the antenna on the airplane, and he falls off, and it's just like, wow, that was a lot of lead up to like just something very simple.
yeah.
And it's not really a doll thing, but I could see why people would just go, "Really?"
Yeah.
Because it's to me, I thought it was funny, but like at the same time, I just picture somebody thinking like this is just completely dumb.
Yeah. We're running pretty long here, Stallman. So
Yeah.
let's get into rankings and get
So
out of here.
yeah, but that being said, that's just nitpicking. Overall, this is a good movie, I think,
I agree.
and I'm on a weird spot here.
I'm gonna let you go first because I think mine's gonna surprise you a bit.
Oh god. Why? Fucking why? All right. This is my number 3.
All right.
Why?
All right. No, I'm totally okay with that. I'm I okay.
The only reason why I put this over, here's the dumb thing. I really want Live and Let Die to be my favorite Roger Moore Bond film at this point, but it's not, because there's so much stuff in Live and Let Die that is like, um it's that is executed poorly, that I have to it's like, this is honestly like a better put together film than Live and Let Die. And the fact that it doesn't bog down automatically to me makes it better than Thunderball. Like,
I
I thoroughly enjoy this film. I just find it ridiculous that so far my number one uh Roger Moore James Bond film is called Octopussy. How the hell am I supposed to sell that to someone? It's
I
like, so what Bond film do you recommend me watching out of the Roger Moore era? Octopussy. No, go fuck yourself.
I
No, no,
okay.
no, no, no. It's a good movie.
I'm not super far away from you, to be honest. I mentioned in the last episode that I had started using Goldfinger as a threshold, right? And so I truly enjoyed this movie, which means it was automatically above Goldfinger. But as I started going higher and higher up my list, I kept going, no, this was a really good movie. And I kept getting mad at myself that I was continuing to put it over and over and over again. I'm going to put this movie at number 2. I I'm even surprised at myself that I put it above Thunderball because I really enjoyed Thunderball. And to be honest with you, the only reason I'm putting it below From Russia with Love is that I had to question if this movie was that good. From Russia with Love instantly went to the top of my list. I knew I enjoyed it. I knew it was good. I knew my gripes were very, very small and nitpicky. I knew that one belonged at the top. And this one, like, I had to put thought into it. So it's such a close number 2, but it's right there. I was very much not expecting to enjoy this movie as much as I did. I thought this one was
Same.
absolutely fantastic.
I
This is such a close number 2.
I honestly was just like, yeah, this is just gonna be okay, and I expected Ted to hate it just from the title alone.
Yeah, reasonably enough.
Oh my god.
All right. Like I said, we're already running long. We're already an hour and 10 minutes. Good God.
Yeah.
As I mentioned in the last episode, the next thing that we put out for this podcast is going to be a comparison for the Battle of the Bonds as a special additional episode rather than reviewing a specific movie. May not get posted on a Thursday, so if you're watching this one ahead of time, we might surprise you with one.
Yeah.
We just have to figure out when we're going to record stuff. It's fine. We're 5 weeks ahead of schedule. Nothing matters.
Right. Yeah, we're gonna, I mean, obviously you see in our rankings that we like this better than Never Say Never Again, but we're gonna really compare the two more in depth in a another episode.
Yeah,
So
do the comparison of the times rather than just saying how each individual movie was. We'll actually put them back to back, stick them together, and give you a real comparison for movies that came out at a very similar time.
and we'll also talk about how contemporaries felt about it, during that time as well, and compare it to our thoughts.
Absolutely, absolutely. With that, I think that's pretty much all we've got for this episode. Sorry, this one ran quite a bit longer than most of them. We'll like I said, we'll get you that bonus episode. We'll get back to movies. If you care to watch the movies with us, they happen on Tuesdays in the Discord. You can check that link below. Installment posts just about every week about when those movies are coming up, what we're watching, and when. So you with us. More episodes to come out on Thursdays. You can catch both of us on Twitch, Stallman at Traductus and myself at Ted Green Eagles. Check out the Discord, check out streams. And otherwise, I think that about wraps us up.
Yeah, it does. All right. And that being said, leave a comment, like, subscribe, hit the bell, and also check out everything that the Cringe Crew has to offer on the YouTube and Bud and Mike streams as well.
Absolutely. All right, man. I think that's it. So, see you next time.
See ya.